so we'll see.
Oh,
there we go. And I think that you might have to allow for that to happen on your screen.
Yeah, it shows it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
There we go, a couple more people. But I'm going to start here. So I just wanted to welcome you all to our artist panel talk tonight for the Continua exhibitions, Continua New Work by Leesa Streifler and Continua Shared Foundations. My name is Kristen Teetart and I am the program coordinator here at the Elsie Shirley Gallery at the Last Mountain Lake Cultural Center. We're on the shores of Last Mountain Lake on Treaty 4 territory in the community of Regina Beach. Regina Beach is a small community about 45 minutes north of Regina. If you've never been here, it's a lovely little place. And we have this fantastic gallery and art center that will be turning 20 next year. I want to thank all of you who have been able to come out here to see the exhibition. For many of you, it might have been your first visit out here, and I hope it all went well for you. We've had, our guest book is full, and it's been great to see so many names of people that have come out here. The idea for this exhibition actually started, I think, about 4 years ago now, a discussion between Leesa and myself at a reception out here. And this was supposed to happen last year, and then we were closed for the better part of last year. So here we are now, and it's just so great to have had this all come into fruition, even though it took a little longer than we thought. And I mean, I think it's actually kind of great to be here on Zoom. It's a way, I think there's probably people in the audience tonight that would not have been here if this was in person. So yeah, thank you all for being here. I want to thank SaskCulture and SkArts. We are clients of the Professional Arts Organization program, and their funding allows us to have this gallery and wonderful exhibitions like this. And this particular event, I'd like to thank SaskCulture for sponsoring. It is part of our Culture Days events, which are happening until just about the end of October, actually. So I think everyone is pretty well used to all this Zoom stuff, but if you are in the audience, if you're able to just keep yourself on mute, you can keep your video on. I am gonna attempt to pin the panelists so that they all show up at the top of your screen, depending on your device. We'll have some time at the end for questions, and you can just pop your questions into the chat, and I will try to monitor those. And when we get to the end of sort of the formal questions, we can go back and visit those. And then I'll invite you to unmute if you would like to elaborate on your question that you had put into the chat. And then chances are then we can just open it up to other questions as well. The theme for tonight kind of evolved into a discussion about sustaining a career in the arts, and how your education, or how the panelists' education sort of contributed to that career, as well as mentorship. I think the idea for this show had sprung from mentorship, but like many things, it evolved a little bit, and our discussion about the questions evolved as well. So I think we'll just kind of get started here. Continua Shared Foundation features 8 artists from Leesa's first few drawing and painting classes in the late 1980s and early 1990s. So with us tonight are Diana Chabros, Michel Boutin, Holly Fay, Ernie Klinger, Jennifer McRorie, Erik Norbraten, Sheila Nourse, and Wendy Peart, and Leesa Streifler, of course. And Leesa, I'm just going to ask if there's anything you want to say while I pin all of our panelists tonight, which sounds awful, but.
Yep. Thanks, Kristen. I want to say thank you to Kristen, who has been just so great to work with. And it doesn't seem like 4 years. It seems much less. And I've enjoyed speaking to you over those years, and really enjoyed working with you over all these months. And there were an incredible number of details. I guess it was my first time out as a curator, believe it or not, really. I can't believe I waited so long, but there's a lot of details in curation, never mind your own show, having your own show. So we really went through a lot of back and forths, and finally I just put her on my phone contact list, and now we just phone each other because it's easier than emailing. But I've really enjoyed working with you. So thank you so much for everything you've done, really.
Thank you. It's been really a pretty great experience, I think, and great for us here. And I'm still finding a couple of you to pin. I'm sorry.
Okay, and also I want to thank all the artists because it's just been a lot of fun working with you, and really interesting getting to know your work and your motivations better. And you've always been so cooperative and so professional, and I think the show looks fantastic. Your work looks great. I admire all of you very much, and there could have been many, many more artists, that I taught, but I had to make some selections, and I'm very happy with selecting who I did. And I had to have some criteria, so I apologize to anyone who wasn't included, but there were so many more that could have been. And it's just so great to see. It's so gratifying as a teacher to see people that you met when they were in their 20s and who are a few decades on, and still making work, and still vital, and still very optimistic, and still speak to you. So thank you to everyone.
For now.
Right.
Anyway.
I think that's
maybe tonight if things might change, actually.
That's all right.
I think that's a good segue. I think everybody is showing up who needs to be showing up. So the first question we have is, how is the career you have today the same or different that you imagined when you were in art school?
Well, I'll start with that. It hasn't really changed, or it's not the same, nor is it different. I haven't really noticed a change. My life has been going at a whirlwind pace, and I've not really noticed any change outside of looking at myself in the video here, recognizing I've got a lot of gray hair.
For me, I went on a little bit of a different path than probably a lot of the people here. After I got my BFA, I went to design school out in NSKA because I wasn't sure about the whole idea of making a living off of my fine artwork, and I always enjoyed doing design work and that sort of thing. So I've had a design career where I've painted and done my personal artwork on the side. So things have worked out pretty well.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'll follow.
Oh, okay.
I was
It's
just
hard to know who's going to speak up. So Diana?
sorry. I was just going to say it's funny because in my case, I was encouraged by I'll say my father, not so much my mother, to go a design route. That's my father had a brother who was a designer, and he really thought that would be a great way for me to make a living as an artist. And I wasn't sold on it. Sorry, Eric.
That's okay.
and I didn't have a plan, but I just keep hearing his voice in my head. Don't come to me unless you have your plan B in place. If things don't work out, you have your plan B. So I've worked for 40 years, pretty much, since art school to put my plan B in place and to then move to plan A. So here I am starting to really, make some tracks with exhibitions. I've always exhibited, but not in any significant way. So really happy to be where I'm at. And thanks, Dad. So Wendy.
Well, I was just piping up because I don't know. Anyways, so So for me, I think, how is it different? Well, of course, I sort of thought it would be okay to live by the just seat of my pants and not have money and be be cool like Leesa and live in New York and, live in a warehouse somewhere. I thought that was where I was going to go. But life comes along and it changes a few things. And I remember doing the math one day. Like I remember specifically doing the math. I was at my job at Carfax at the time, and I was walking to work. I think I was pregnant with my second kid, and I was like literally counting out how many shows I would need to have in a year, and how much work I'd need to sell, and how many grants I would need to get, and realized barely nobody does that. And so I realized kind of at that point that I really had to sort of put my efforts into different things. So I really got into teaching. And it went into education kind of through the back door, which sort of, when this job came up at the Dunlop, it sort of took all of my experience over the last 20 years being an artist, being a teacher, being an administrator, and it packaged it into one beautifully for me. So I think I came to my so-called career a little later in life. So that's how I ended up kind of being where I am right now, sort of in my quote unquote dream job. I like being around people though too. So that, for me, makes a difference.
I think my career has been much more than I thought it would be. Well, first of all, I wanted to be Picasso, so that didn't quite happen. I wanted to be a mega star when I was young, but that didn't happen. But what did happen instead is much, much better in my perspective, because it's been very textured. I've had so many fantastic relationships with people, and I've just done such a wide variety of things, travel, because of art, travel, meeting people, having opportunities to do different kinds of exhibitions, all those things. The teaching, of course, which I had planned to do, but the teaching was so gratifying, and everything, and there was a lot of support. And I think it's just people, really. I never thought about people. I just thought about being famous. That's what I thought about. Doing my best work, but being famous and recognized. But I never thought about what that would really mean or anything like that. And even though I'm not a household name, I really think I've achieved so much that gives me gratification. I feel very good about it.
I think we'll end up maybe circling back to what Diana said about a plan B, and what Wendy touched on as well when we talk about sort of sustainability of an art career. But thank you all for jumping in there and answering the first question. So I guess along the lines of art school, then, if you can name two of the most important things that you learned in art school.
I can jump in on this one because I like this question a lot, and I actually have 3 answers though, so you have to let me answer 3. First of all, I think what going to art school does is really open up your eyes to what art is. And I learned that I'm good at this art thing, and I think really importantly, when you go to art school, you learn that there's other misfits out there like yourself that you have a community of, and you realize, oh, this is my home. This is where I belong. This is my place. So all those things together really made art school like this fantastic experience for me that, I go back to many times.
I'm going to jump in too, because I think one of the things for me was I was always a rule breaker. And when I went to art school, it was okay to break rules. And so the possibilities that it offered for me to do that was the biggest thing I learned.
I agree with Holly. Finding my community for the first time in my life was huge, just huge. But what I had written down was, when I was thinking about this, was learning color theory. Has nothing to do with people, learning color theory and exploring a range of materials, because those are two things that I know would never have happened if I hadn't gone to art school. And I've used those things over and over again, you know, my knowledge of materials and the color theory that I was taught. But I think Holly's answer was great, because finding a community was probably the most important.
I like
Nice,
what Holly said. Sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, I just wanted to add another thing. I don't know about all of you and all the people actually in this whole webinar who I'm assuming have some experience with the art world. But I think for me, one of the greatest gifts I received through my training in the art world is to look at and perceive differently, look at the world completely from a different angle. Sometimes I'll catch myself just looking at, you know, something really, banal like a sunset. Well, it's not banal, but, and then just somehow getting this other kind of thought about it at another angle on something, or it could have been a situation, it could have been a social situation that I think I've learned to think critically in art school and think perceptively, and always just sort of look at something upside down or from a different angle. That's what I think was the greatest gift that I received.
I would underscore that. Problem solving really important. That lifelong learning curve, being able to turn things on their head and kind of, yes, as Wendy said, turn them on their head. And I can't imagine not having this lens. I think life would be so utterly boring to not have this lens to be able to engage with life in this way. And I'll just leave it at that.
I actually had the same thing as Leesa. I said color theory because that was pretty foundational for me. And it was Leesa who taught my first painting class. And I was telling her this, I remember her making us do these chart after chart of all these color combinations. And I absolutely hated it, but it was such a great exercise because it gave me a good foundation in color. But the other thing too, I think that I really learned from art school was the discipline it takes for an art practice, and just putting in the time, devoting yourself to a project, which was great. I spent a lot of very late nights, and I can't do that anymore. Working late nights until 5 in the morning, like I did in art school, but yeah, it really instilled that drive.
Anyone else on that?
If I may.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, like, for me that, it was nice to learn those foundational things, drawing in some of the classes, foundational figurative drawing and still life and so on. One of the things I appreciated about Leesa's class is that she encouraged us to be a little more daring in our approach and to be expressive. And that really stuck with me. So I haven't remembered any of the color theory at all, which is probably why I'm doing mostly monochromatic work. But, I really appreciated some of the things that we did. For instance, in the middle of winter, we boarded a bus with these huge canvases, the whole class. We boarded a school bus, drove out to a farm where somebody was exercising a horse. And we had our cans of turpentine and our cans of paint. And we put the canvases up against the side of the building. And we were encouraged to draw not the horse, but the movement of the horse. And so I found that to be really exciting and stretch the boundaries of what I thought art was at the time. Just another one of those exciting things that we did.
I love that. Well, if there's nothing else there, this was added, I think, our panelists, maybe we sort of discussed this yesterday, Leesa and I, so we added this one in for you guys. So if you haven't had a chance to think about it, Leesa has volunteered to answer first. What was left out of your formal art education and how did that impact your practice? What did you end up learning on your own or seek out mentorship or other resources to learn from?
Yeah, a lot was left out of my my art education. One of the biggest things is critical theory. That was left out of my graduate education because postmodernism had just started. I went to grad school 1980 to 1983, and they weren't discussing it. So, you know, in our grad program at the U of R, theory was huge. I mean, you really had to learn it. So I had to learn that on my own. So, you know, that was really difficult, but I felt that I needed to do that. So I did my best, but not the same as getting it, you know, in school. And the other thing is video. Video was not, maybe it wasn't around at all when I went to undergraduate school, or just starting, I guess, but they didn't teach it. I remember when I was in grad school, they kind of had a couple video cameras and you could kind of take a course, but it was just all too much for me. So I didn't do it. And so now I'm actually going to do a video piece for the first time in my life. You know, now in my career, I'll need technical expertise and everything, but with the iPhone, actually, I feel a little bit emboldened to do video. But I've had lots of ideas for video, but I haven't been educated in it. And one thing I know that the people that are on this panel, like there was a real problem at the U of R with photography, but someone might want to mention that. Anyway, there were big holes.
Also, when we were in school, I don't think there was a course on the business of art.
Yes, that's right. The business. Who said that? I sort of.
Oh, Leesa. Sheila.
Oh, Sheila.
I concur with that. That's what I was going to mention.
Right, there wasn't, but there is now. Well, maybe Holly could talk about that, but there wasn't. You're right, at that time, anything about that, and it's just so important. But Holly, you're teaching it, I think, right now.
Yes, and one of my students I've noticed is here tonight. So hi, Vanessa.
Yeah, that would have been helpful to have a business course. I didn't even think about that when I was coming out of art schools.
Oh, and I think wasn't it you, Wendy, who taught the first one?
I taught it for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right on the heels of also working at Carfax. I think that's why Leesa asked me to teach it or something, or Ruth did, because I've been working at Carfax. I taught it for 10 years. That also that's also kind of what led me to think more creatively about my practice. But I do have to say, I remember, Leesa, you brought in an artist. I think it was Micah Lexier. Do you remember when you brought him in and he sat down with us? And he was trying to impart some business ideas or business of art. And I remember he told us, the thing I remember, he said, in your slide package, you know, because we had to do slides back then, make sure your last slide has the color red or orange in it. You should just do that. So I did. And actually I found it really, really helped.
Wow.
So if I had an image that had some red, I just stuck it at the end.
I remember him saying, I guess it was the same visit, that he put to make a show, he put all the supplies on his credit card. I remember that. I thought, oh my God, I mean, who could do that?
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know how solid his plans were.
I would add, though, there's also the aspect of, how would I characterize it? How would I describe it? If you as an artist meet with blockage, you know, throughout your life, I don't know if we were I don't know if that was addressed, you know, gee, you've hit a dark spot, or you're just not able to move forward with something. People hit blockages, and I had to really struggle with that through my career as an artist. I was in hiatus for quite a while and had to find ways. I kept on with it. I stayed creative in many ways, just not necessarily making art in the studio, and finally found a couple of resources to kickstart. And so that might have been something. I don't know if they address that in art school now or not. That would be more the psychological component. So the business component, but also that psychological, emotional component.
Yeah, I kind of along the same lines of what Diane is saying. I don't feel like the art education I had was really lacking. I think we were introduced to a lot of different opportunities. Like Leesa and I were talking about, there was a curator that was brought in from New York, and we worked with her for a week. Laura Trippi and Kevin Kelly came and worked with us, did video workshops and things like that. And there was Art 400, which is the business of art course. Marcia Kennedy was teaching my graduation class that. And but one thing I struggled with when I got out of school, like I did what you're supposed to do. I got a studio right away and set up, and I'd find I'd go in and it was so intimidating, knowing how to work without having my profs there, without having the guidance or the feedback, the dialogue. I really missed it. And so yeah, I really struggled with that. And it wasn't until actually I considered doing a mentorship program with Carfax, through Carfax Sask. And I didn't end up actually being mentored through that program, but Karen Schoonover and Martha Cole mentored me, and Marnie Badham actually together. And it was basically we were trying to figure out, we explored the creative process, and we were just trying to learn how to trust our own instincts. And that was really helpful.
Yeah. To me, you know, it was never really about the business of art. You know, it became a lifestyle. It wasn't about career. It was never about profession. It was always about lifestyle. So the two main things that I learned at art school were simply that I could embrace art and artistic lifestyle, which is what I've done. It's been difficult, you know, like Wendy was mentioning earlier. It's hard to fund a independent lifestyle. It's hard to maintain that. And I find over the years, that's been my biggest problem is a lot of the bunk I've had to do to earn money to carry on. You know, I've spent a lot of time and a lot of years doing things that I really have no interest in, simply to be making money within the field of the arts. Recently, I became an independent artist after 15 years as working as a curator, administrator, artistic animateur. And I initially was lost. You know, I really didn't know how to run my own practice or be my own artist again. So I lucked out and got an artist residency at the Ramey Modern. So I've got a few more months now that I can float through being an actual artist focused on my own work. And this is the first time in close to a decade, if not more. So it's all going fine. One thing too that I'll mention about when we started going to school was, Leesa kind of touched on this, how postmodernism was just starting. I took full advantage of that. Leesa was one of my main profs. She was teaching me drawing, but I was making sculptures, kind of like the sculpture you see in this show. I was doing drawings out of objects with objects. So I'm kind of doing that again now. But to me, that period really opened up a lot. You know, it opened up my whole practice to multimedia. Now I do performance and sound. I spent a lot of years painting, but now I do performance and sound again. So, you know, it comes around full circle when it's a lifestyle.
I have to agree with you, Michelle, because I recently retired from a job, and I've been working and making my own work now for a year and a half, full throttle. Like I've been just pumping out the work every day, and it's been very, very rewarding. I've done a lot of work in my past that I've done, and I've had shows, but having that job is kind of soul sucking for the art, really. And this time it's now just been absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, institutional bureaucracy just kills me.
Yeah.
I think it might be any job though, because, you know, I had an excellent job for an artist, you know, being a prof, but it took all my energy too. And now we've been retired for about the same amount of time, Sheila,
Yeah.
and I'm just pumping out the work too. So
No.
I have a lot of energy. I think it's just I mean, you know, there's different types of jobs and they're more soul sucking than others, you know. Mine didn't suck my soul, but it definitely sucked my energy.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Especially
sure.
as I got older, as you know, each decade it was different. It was
Well,
more and more.
you tend to put a lot into it, Leesa, especially when you're teaching and you're teaching art. You're probably putting a lot into those students so that people like us who benefited from that can go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I benefited a lot too, and I still make my work, but it's just different making your work when you don't have another job.
Yeah.
It is a lot different, and that's how we'd like it to be, but that's unfortunately not the way it is for 90, 95, 98% of artists.
Yeah.
This is interesting because this kind of evolved into another topic that we had a little later down. So I think it's apt to ask it here. Are there ways in which your job or career now or in the past has influenced your art practice?
Well, for me, being a graphic designer, and I do a lot of illustration in my paintings and you know, other drawings and things like that. They're very influenced by illustration and my graphic design practice. Like I often will mess around with different styles and things like that in my design practice, and I do that with my painting as well. So there's a little bit of cross-pollination there.
I can answer this one as well. Like Wendy, teaching as a sessional at the university before I started full time there. I taught as a sessional for many years, and you're often teaching the same class over and over again. And one of the classes I taught repeatedly was Intro to Drawing, and I love teaching that class. I still love teaching that class. But I realized what was happening is I was getting drawn more and more into drawing. When I was doing my BFA, my practice was in drawing and painting, but my major was really drawing and minor was painting. So as I'm teaching drawing repeatedly, I'm just getting pulled into it. I'm looking at contemporary drawing practice, historic drawing practice, and I just gravitated or drawing pulled me back. And now I really place my practice within drawing. And I think that came about because I was, you know, so much into research and drawing, like way beyond what I'd even represent or present in class, but just looking at it and just being really inspired and found it very compelling. And I realized I noticed when I was painting, I was thinking about drawing. So as soon as I was finished the body of work that I needed to finish for an exhibition, I got onto the drawing, and that was over 10 years ago. And I'm still going with drawing now.
I'm actually curious whether Jennifer and I have a similar answer to this question. As curators and administrators, I find myself thinking, sometimes overthinking, when I'm thinking about a work, and because I seem to have like a lot of stuff that I'm using, that I'm applying to thinking about or criticizing or analyzing what I'm making, that in some cases I have to work at like pulling back those layers and try to be more fresh, as opposed to having this like curator critical with all this background noise. I don't know, Jen, or does this sound familiar to you? You're muted, Jen.
You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I can relate to that for sure, Wendy. And yeah, and I think that could kind of be inhibiting maybe in the, you know, if you're trying to work on your own work. Yeah. I have to say though, there has been like times where I mean, I love working with artists, and as I'm sure you do too, and I'm inspired by you know, doing studio visits with artists and talking to them about their work, and so it does. There is times where it really motivates me to get into the studio, and I think too, like especially with COVID, I have discovered this in the past though too, is that you know, I really get a lot of I guess satisfaction from working as a curator, working at the gallery, and there's definitely creative aspects of it, but it doesn't scratch the itch that I have as an artist, the creative itch that I do try to get into the studio. Even though there's times where I'm so busy that I can't devote a lot of time, but I still try to make some time because I need to have that balance, to just personally feel balanced. And I really discovered that, especially during COVID, I needed an outlet to deal with stress, and yeah, so
Something that you can control.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, as a professor, it was very, very conducive to my art practice. My job, you know, my job was, you know, rewarded me for, you know, doing well in my art practice, and I needed to keep up with current artists and ideas, and that was really, really nurturing for my art practice. So it was fantastic. And talking to students, I was very motivated and excited. And you know, it wasn't the same as making art at all. I mean, even though it's very related to, you know, to being an artist, it really was totally apart from my own art practice. But I agree with Holly. Yeah, I taught drawing a lot too, and I taught life drawing is what I chose to teach in basic foundational drawing. And I just love, I've fallen in love over and over every year with life drawing, and I just love it. It's my most favorite thing to teach. So, I mean, I think the passion for art was nurtured in my job. And I really am grateful for that, and the support that I got as a professor from the university. Very grateful for all that.
I'll
I
just
love
maybe
these answers as someone who is, oh, sorry, Diana. Just the commenting of being surrounded by the arts, and it being inspiring, and also, you know, sort of, it doesn't quite satisfy that itch, but it takes a lot of your creative energy to do it. And so it's always fascinating to me, people who find that career and creative balance. And it probably comes and goes at different points too.
It's tough to find the balance. I don't know, do we have a questions kind of about that? But I don't want to, you know, speak out of turn, but that's a good point. The balance between a job, your job, and well, your personal life, and your own, you know, health and well-being, and your art practice. Those are a lot of things to balance. And I always felt like I was juggling, always. You know, in something, sometimes my art practice was on the top, but usually it was not, because the other things came first. My job, you know, I felt responsible, of course, to my job and my students. And so that came first. And then my family, though, was competing for that. And then my well-being and my art practice are also, everything was competing. And I found that I never figured out how to do that well. I feel like I never figured it out. I never felt, oh, I've just got it all. I just really know how to take care of my life and manage my life. There was always something out of balance.
Diana, I think you were gonna say something there.
I'll try and weigh in on that. It's very much been a struggle, and it continues to be a struggle. I moved to the Southwest 10 years ago to try and find that balance, and thinking that I could maybe leap from an organizational life and way of making an income to more of an entrepreneurial lifestyle. And it was an experiment, and it failed miserably in that things are successful, but I can't operate my business, the B&B business, and make art at the same time. They are mutually exclusive, and I've tried really hard. So it was a good experiment, but it didn't work. So I, you know, it's on again, off again, right? It's maybe 6 months of this and 6 months of that, or it's setting this aside to be able to do this. So that's been interesting. I would say one of the beauties of moving and being closer to my subject matter, I just felt that call that I needed to work with the land more closely, is meeting a friend of mine, a new friend, now older friend, who is an artist and lives that artist lifestyle beautifully, Madonna Hamel, and she has done many things in her life, but she moved to Val Marie, where her mother grew up, and we support each other. We have these amazing conversations, and I'm just so lucky, so blessed to have her in my midst. So I find that to be a great support, and she somehow does find that balance. I just cram a lot of things into my life, so I think that's the problem.
So I'm hearing, you know, many of you do work in the arts as well as being artists. And Diana, you said that your non-art job was was exclusive from your art practice. Does anyone else have a career perhaps that isn't in the arts, and did that influence anything that you do, or was your art your escape from your alternate career?
Well, I never had a career in the arts per se. I did do some sessional teaching, but my other career was mainly doing windows, dressing mannequins. I mean, whatever I had to do to support my children. I was a single mom, you know? So that's what you do. You do what you have to do. And the arts was always at night once the kids were in bed. I didn't sleep much.
I remember when I was, in undergraduate school and in graduate school in New York, I waitressed. That was 10 years of my life that I waitressed. And the reason I did that is because you can do that, make a lot of money in the short amount of time, and leave the job and not think about it at all. Like other people were artist assistants, which you'd think would be sort of a nicer kind of job, or they were, something else, or maybe a salesperson or something. But for me, I figured out that this would work the best, and it did. It did work the best for me. So I really liked that. So when I went to I knew when I went to my studio and I knew when I worked, and they were mutually exclusive. And, I didn't have to work that often because I made a lot of money during the times I worked. So that worked. I mean, I didn't make a lot of money overall, but I made the most money I could. I maximized the money that I could make. And that actually worked quite well. But I mean, it wasn't anywhere, near as gratifying as being a professor. So, or it didn't make much money, but it did work well while I was young for 10 years. So, well, but you can't continue that. Like what Wendy was saying, that doesn't continue on when you're older because it's just too hard to do a job like that. And it doesn't give you enough income. So that was good for 10 years, but I wouldn't have been able to sustain myself like that. Sometimes I had dreams when I was a professor that, I lost my job and that I went to back to waitressing. And it wasn't actually a nightmare because I actually enjoyed it. But you can't keep doing that when you're older. I mean, you can, I guess, but I couldn't do that.
I also did part-time work with the city of Regina, Leesa, doing classes with them. So you do it, you just do. If you really want to make art, I just did. And that's what I would do. Like ceramic classes. I had that skill and I used it.
Maybe it's always changing, right? One thing's not going to work decade after decade. I think the nature of these transitional times is, you change and what you need changes and what you can do changes.
Yes, exactly.
There's a question in the chat here that kind of ties into another question that we were looking at. Did you ever have a moment, this is Vanessa West, did you ever have a moment in your career where you lost confidence in your work or the direction your work was going? If so, how did you overcome that self-doubt? And one of the things we had discussed earlier is sort of like the biggest challenges in sustaining your art practice. And so perhaps those are some things to think about together.
I don't know an artist that never goes through doubt.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we all do. And it's just something we have to work through ourselves. It's sort of like you have to get up every morning and say, I'm going to spend this much time in my studio, and you do it.
That's kind of part of the process almost,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always found that even in any typical day that I would spend in the studio, I would ride waves of being really high on an idea or being like really into this thing I was doing, but then like, an hour later sitting back going, what, is that right? Or should I change it? So even in one day you have that. So in any given year or life cycle, you're going to have those waves. You just have to learn how to ride them. And like Erik said, embrace that process because it's really important.
Sometimes,
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that the same thing as Wendy is like I experience that too. There's sometimes I look at what I've done in the studio and I think, I'm the greatest artist in the world. I'm so brilliant. Then something happens and I think, oh, why am I even here? Why am I doing this? I should be doing something else. So yeah, I think that's really normal. And it is, unfortunately, we compare ourselves to other artists, which is never a good thing, but it's really hard not to do that. But you know, if I start making art because I'm following trends, then it becomes a job, right? It's not about my vision and my ideas. It's just another kind of job. And I that's not why, you know, I'm here. That's not why I want to be an artist. It's more like what Michelle was saying. It's more like your identity and a lifestyle.
And I'll jump in there. Well, about those dark times, you know, everybody has those. Artists, we tend to be a little bit more moody, maybe bipolar, whatever the hell. But what I do with those dark spots, you know, and I've had some pretty long ones, 5 years at a time, 3 years at a time. But what I do with those is I use those dark spots to mine from. So I mine present and future theme from the dark. They're the pits. They're the mining pits.
That's a great way to put it, Michel. I do that too. When something, you know, terrible happens in my life, or I feel terrible, I think this is going to be something I can use in the future in my work. But I think, as everyone has said already, you need to work through it. And it's true that in one day you can have, in 1 hour, you could even have, you know, feelings of, you know, sort of elation and feelings of self-doubt. It's quite incredible, the process. I mean, I try to center myself as much as possible with things I like music. Having music can put me in a certain zone. Also, you know, drinking tea that I like, things like that, that calm me, you know, things that calm me. I do a lot of writing in my sketchbook that calms me a lot, drawing and writing. So I basically, I find what I need to do is not panic, you know, and, but also, you know, the things that your support system, right? Whoever is your support system, it's important to keep that going, and to, you know, even give yourself a day off, right? Give yourself a day off and not worry that you didn't get anything done, that you, but maybe you did get something done, and maybe you could do something for your art. I remember someone once told me that he does something for his art every day, even if it's mailing a letter or something for his art. He feels like he's done something. So I try to cut myself some slack sometimes and just say, okay, you didn't like create something today, but you looked up something for your art, or you did something, or you bought some supplies. So that kind of thing. And, or even take a long nap in your studio. Sometimes I sleep the whole time I'm in the studio. And that's okay too, because the next time might be a really productive time.
I think you raised a good point, Leesa, where you were saying, I really love how you create a nice environment for yourself. And I try to do that too. I love your idea of drawing and even journaling in your sketchbook to get your mind centered. But the point you made about having a support person that you could bring in, that you trust their judgment, maybe you trust their eye. And I think that's important too. And I'm married to another artist, so I do have somebody that I can bring in. And I remember, when I was in grad school, I was really struggling and thinking that what I was working on was really awful. And Ward came to visit, and he was there, and he said, just live with it. You know, because I was at a point where I wanted to start, ripping canvases, kind of thing. And he said, just live with it. He said, and just leave it alone. And I did, I put this one piece up, and because he said to me, there's an interesting energy that's coming out of that piece. Just live with it. You don't need to know what to do with that yet. And it was really good advice. And it actually encouraged me to stop what I'd been doing, that I've been struggling with, and go a completely different avenue. I think it's good to have somebody that you trust, that'll be gentle with you.
I think that's really good, the idea of just living with it. Sometimes for me, I will not be able to live with it, and I'll rip it up and use it in another piece, just to get the memory of that failure, what I think a failure is, and just get rid of it and use it somewhere else.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know how to finish a piece.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to do other ones. Sometimes on the way doing other things, you have a little aha moment about that other piece and go, oh yeah, now I can go back and finish it this way. So
Yeah.
I found lately that, you know, it occurred to me that I'm editing myself a lot, and that created a roadblock for me in my work. So I would work on a piece and it was going in a direction that was a little bit different than what I felt my art was about. So by learning, like if I have an idea now, I'll try to make an immediate effort to work that idea out rather than hesitating and editing myself too much. So that's led to a lot of new experimentation, and I'm kind of excited about that.
yeah, I suppose it must be tough for some artists who have kind of a signature style and they're known for a certain thing, and you know, they feel like they just have to keep doing it because that's what people are expecting. So good for you for pushing your boundaries.
And I find that if I'm starting to feel precious about work and it's beginning to create a block for me, I just move to a different medium, and it might be tempera paint, you know, and I just allow myself to get in there, get messy, get playful, and it can morph, you know, as many times as I need it to. It can become a completely different painting. And I've had actually a whole series come out of that work. So it's been really useful, intuitive painting that way. So that's what I've been using. Yeah.
So when we are talking about sort of sustaining an art practice, you know, over decades, it sounds to me that it's kind of a combination of like flexibility and perseverance. I don't know if any one of us could sum up, you know, an answer to the question of, are there 2 words or a sentence that would say how you sustained your career over 30 plus years?
Well, you have to be a little stubborn, I think.
Yes, stubborn indifference.
Yeah.
Tenacity.
Definitely stubborn.
A little bit dumb sometimes for me, anyway.
Just conviction. Just
Yeah.
can't let it go. You know, it's funny because that word attachment was introduced to me by another writer, actually, an artist, many years ago, and it's been very useful for many reasons. But this one, I've decided, no, I'm going to remain attached. I'm not letting this one go. Just keep going.
I'm not always sure if it's optimism or stubbornness, because I feel like I always am in a state of becoming something more than I am when I'm making art.
Mm-hmm.
And that part is the part that keeps me going.
I like that, Sheila. Like, I feel that too. I feel that I'm my best when I'm making my work. I'm way better than I actually, you know, am. It's something above me, and I want that. And it's such a good feeling when that does actually work, when you can see yourself kind of reflected back, but kind of a better version of yourself. Or it's very, I don't know, it's something I guard with everything. I guard it as fiercely as I guarded my son, like very fiercely. I would never, ever let it go because it's my identity. It's me. It would be like cutting off part of me, and I would never do that to myself. So, but there's a reward in there, right? Even though we've been talking a lot about the struggle, but there's a reward too. And it's not like, you know, art is fun, because it's really mostly struggle. But when it does work, it's just, you know, it can take you, you know, you can look at even work from the past a long time ago, and there's something in it that you liked, and it just makes you feel there's some kind of wonderful identification or something that I can't compare it to anything really.
I just have been monitoring the chat here, and I think this is a nice sort of lead into we want to touch on mentorship a little bit, and D-Funk has written in the chat. She's starts out by saying, I'm not sure this is a question, but I can say that Jennifer McRorie reached out to me after I got my BFA to be so encouraging. Leesa did the same as well. So many people at the U of R seemed like a part of their education was to pass on mentorship, even informally or for no financial exchange. And then later also says, many of the panelists I've met are generous to a fault. My question would be, is it important to you to pass on the lessons or encouragement or the lessons you have learned? And I kind of like those comments because, I mean, this show did kind of spring out of the idea of mentorship. So does anyone want to touch on that? Just sort of the, what seems to be the environment of mentorship that exists within the community. Is that too broad? Should I bring it in with a question?
It's very much our question number 6 that we had. Right?
Yeah,
and I think it's very important for artists to nurture other artists. And I've always said that artists are the most generous people I've ever met, just as a generalization. But and I think it's just so rewarding to be able to pass your knowledge on to help someone. You know, it's just, and I think Saskatchewan people are also very generous. I mean, when I've lived in Toronto and in New York, and it wasn't the same there at all. It was competitive. You felt that other artists were, I mean, most people, not all, but it was a competitive situation, or people didn't have enough time to give you. But in Saskatchewan, that's one of the things I always loved about it, was that people give of their time and of themselves. Yeah, not for any financial gain, just for feeling good about doing that.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Thanks, Dee, for your kind comments. It's funny that you thought that I was reaching out to you. Dee and I shared a studio space in the Last Mountain Lake Cultural Center. We had the studio in the upstairs part, and it was just great to share a studio with Dee, and to be able to talk with someone about the work they were doing, and yeah, so it was just great. But I think that in some of the jobs, that the different positions that I've held, I've done teaching through the University Extension Program and the Neil Bockwell Center. So I felt like I was helping mentor people that way. And but also, like, I did work at the organization of Saskatchewan Arts Councils, and a lot of the artists that we were engaging with around the province, there were a lot of people that were emerging. And so, yeah, it felt like it was just part of my job to help get them, I guess, give them some, not directions, but just support them in their practice, and just help them, encourage them to consider, Carfax mentorship programs, or yeah, just to find the supports they need to build a practice. Yeah.
Fortunately for myself and Holly, we were part of the Carfax mentorship program when it first originated, and I believe John Newstaden was our mentor at that time, and that program is still going on, which I think is really beneficial to a lot of artists. Also, I found that Leesa and Dennis were always there for me and always open to having me contact them at any time and just get advice, which has always been great.
I can
Yeah,
jump in.
I just want to say about the Carfax mentorship program. I've been involved with it as a mentor. I also was the person who, in conjunction with Patrick Close, created that program. But I was mentored by Mawa, mentoring artists for women's art, to design that program. And little did I know at the time how successful it would be and how much change that made for many artists in the province. I'm really happy to see that still going on. But I think formal and informal mentorships are super important. But I also think, and what I appreciate, like what I really appreciate about how Leesa mentored me and how Dennis mentored me, that they would never, they never place themselves at a certain position above you or like, I'm your mentor. It was this very even, the relationship was very give and take. Leesa and Dennis would have us over to their homes and for dinner, invite everyone over, and it just felt like a family. So those kind of informal mentorships are really important, where there is like an easy exchange and not this idea, you know, that there's a, sorry, I'm really tired, I have no words left, where there's like a stratification between people that is just, it's a community that we all support each other. And even if you are mentoring somebody, in a way, those emerging artists, they're mentoring you too. Like it's a two-way street. They support you just as much as you support them, I find anyway. And in my role at the Dunlop Art Gallery, where I'm also supervising young artists, that has certainly been the case for me as well. I've learned so much from being around younger people and kind of starting out their career. So
I forgot that you were involved. I forgot that you were involved in the beginning of the mentorship, Wendy. And I remember thinking, I don't know if this is going to work in Winnipeg, because I mean in Regina, because Winnipeg is a bigger city and, you know, it's just different.
Yeah.
Artists for women's art, but Carfax was going to do it for, you know, any artist, regardless of gender. And I didn't know if it would work out, but it's worked. It's been going on for what, 20 years or maybe more? 25?
Oh, that makes me sound old. Well, I am old. So
a long time, right?
yeah, a long time. But I remember when I went, I actually took a trip to Winnipeg to talk with them about it. And I was highly criticized for not having it, that it was open to everyone. That did not fare well with the group, the amazing people at MAWA. It was like, well, we just want to help everybody.
But it's such a great program, and it's helped so many artists. And I think it fills that gap that you were talking about, Jen, about going to your studio. You got a studio right after school, and then you didn't know what, you know, you were scared in there and didn't know what you were going to do. I think it fills that that gap right after school. You can go and meet with a professional artist, and they'll help you with what is a studio practice and what is, you know, all the things you have to do to be a professional artist. And I think it's just a fabulous program. I've never participated in it on either end, but you know, I've always been involved with MAWA here in Winnipeg, even when I lived there in Regina. But it's just an amazing way to learn, and it's an amazing way to give and get support. And I totally agree that when you do mentor people, you know, as a teacher, I figured I was a mentor, you get as much as you give, for sure.
I like Loretta put in the comments the idea of mutual mentorship or reciprocal mentorship, and it sounds like that seems to be many people's experience. Yeah. Do we have any other thoughts on mentorship? I feel like there were some very fantastic things said.
Yeah, I also find that I've sort of joined this little group of women who we talk every 2 weeks on Zoom from BC. They're in BC, I'm here. And we just talk about art and art studio practices. And it's almost like mentoring each other. And it's very comforting to know that people are in that position all the time, that they always need to talk about that. They always need to sort of express their ideas with other artists. Loretta is part of that group, and it's been really helpful to me.
Yeah, mentorship groups are very valuable. Talking about the Carfax group, you know, I took full advantage of that program right from the beginning. I was a mentee, and I mentored twice through that program. Also through that program, through Carfax, I developed a business of art mentorship for SkArts, the youth arts organization in Saskatchewan, that I ended up running that program for, that business of art program for them for about 11 years. Also through mentoring and inspired through Carfax. I started and maintained an artist collective for 15 years. That was basically a mentorship collective where I was mentoring younger artists. And it was a curatorial and mentorship collective for me. So it was a life-changing experience. I mean, I've recently just ended it, and it's very difficult for me to be thinking independently, which is something I didn't quite think would happen. I'm always thinking within a mentorship capacity. So even as I'm working as an independent artist, I'm constantly trying to figure out, well, how can I bring in a younger artist to do this part? Or how can I support these guys to be doing that part? Or maybe I can add a workshop and teach these people. You know, so it's a funny thing. It's kind of a strange addictive responsibility to the lifestyle that I didn't really think would happen, you know.
And yeah, I can just add to that, and Michelle, you certainly have been really active in this, is that mentorships are really important because not everybody fits into formal education. Going to university isn't a good fit for everyone. So mentorships are really important to share that kind of knowledge that you might get in a formal education with those people that don't have access to, or for some reason it's not a good fit for them. So it's really important. And I've also as Sheila said, I was a mentee in a way back in the beginning, and then I remember Wendy working on that program because I think I was on the board or part of the committee for the mentorship. And then in turn, I've mentored artists in the program many times. And I just finished one with an artist, and we did the whole thing over Zoom this last time, but it was fabulous. I learned lots from Patrick. It was great.
Yeah, I can say that I'm really happy to share what I can with younger, or it might be people of my own age who are just starting to push into that kind of that form of expression, being an artist. So mentorship is extremely important. I was happy to participate in Clint's traveling mentorship recently, and it was a reciprocal engagement for all of us. It was lovely. So lots of trades.
Over the years, I've shared my studio with a number of people, and having different studio mates, it's been great. It's been really helpful. Most of them have been probably younger than myself. And I must say I've learned as much from them as I'm sure they've learned from me. It hasn't been a sort of a instructional thing, and certainly it's informal, but exchanging ideas has been incredible and invigorating. Recently, I've had a few artists that have contacted me, people that I've known for years perhaps, but haven't really spent a lot of time with, and they've reached out, and we've sort of looked at each other's recent work, that sort of thing. Again, sort of informally critiquing, encouraging each other. I've been really thankful for those that have reached out to me, and it's been great.
Another not mentorship situation, but like a social, not social even, like a group situation can be with studios. And I think that's something to think about too, because I've had studios on my own and then studios with other people. And right now I'm in a situation where there's 3 floors in a warehouse building, and I'm on a floor with about 9 other artists, and we each have doors and everything, but you know, we see each other, you know, as we come in or whatever. And I really like that. So I'm choosing that over working on my own because I like the sense of community. And you know, everybody's very respectful, and painters aren't usually very good at communal kind of things. And I remember I went to Open Studio in Toronto once for a residency, as a printmaking residency, and they said, well, you'll come every day to the studio and you'll draw here, you know, get everything ready, and then we'll print it. And I said, no, I think I'll just do that in my apartment, you know. And they said, no, we want you to be here. And I thought, that is going to be so bad. Everybody's going to bother me, and I'm not going to be able to focus. And that's not the way it is. I mean, artists are respectful of each other. If it was anything, it was probably me bothering other people. You know, I was the one who was chatty, but you know, people know what it means to work, and everybody respects each other. So I found working in a communal studio situation a very, very good thing. And also you can share supplies that way. Like, you know, I don't have a great ladder at the moment. So, you know, I didn't have a great mop either, you know, stuff like that. And also experiences. For my show, actually at the LC Shirley, I wasn't sure how I wanted to hang my work, because I've never showed work on paper that isn't framed. And so I talked to someone, a studio mate, and he happens to be, his job is to install art. And we ran some ideas, you know, past each other, and it was very helpful. So that kind of thing, I think, is also a way to form community and connection.
Okay, well, I think we have 9 minutes left. I think we had some great conversation here, and I love to end this on this sort of communal mentorship, sharing of knowledge sort of theme. There are a few questions in the chat. And there's lots of nice comments. So panelists, I encourage you to scroll through the chat here maybe before we go. But there was a question here from, now I need to find it. Ooh, I've lost it. Okay, from Marlena Wyman, just this going back, I think probably it touches a little bit on sustaining an art practice, maybe goes into a little bit of the business of the arts, which we talked about a bit, and the panelists, we talked about this a bit before we actually started this. Talking a little bit about mature artists as opposed to emerging artists, does anyone find there are fewer opportunities for mature artists as opposed to emerging artists, so far as grants, residencies, etc.? The impression that mature artists have made it.
I would like to speak to this one a little bit, because I have recently, and even in the past, learned of or became familiar with some mature artists who started making art when they're like old pastors in their 60s, and have made it relatively quickly. Because they're smart and they're wise and they know stuff. So for example, Donald Art Gallery just exhibited the work of Daphne Boyer, very, very strong work. And she just literally started dedicating herself to arts in the last decade, maybe even less than that. And now she's like hot as something. She's on fire. Agatha Dick, I think, who we all know as a really well-established Winnipeg-based artist, she didn't start making art until after her husband retired. And she just said at that point, hey, now it's my turn. I'm doing this thing. And again, made a really, viable career, created a viable career as a mature artist. So was it Marlene who said that? Anyway, I just want to say, I think, like, I mean, speaking as from a curatorial point of view, it doesn't matter how old an artist is or what stage they are at. If their work is strong and if they're making consistent, if they're making work consistently, that's what matters. So it's the work, and I remember that's something Leesa would always say, it's the work that matters. It really, really, really is. So it doesn't matter. And even if, like, there could be people who went to art school, decided to get a job and like went away from the arts, but maybe at some point they're going to go back to it, and that art will always be there, so they can do that. Yeah, I was compelled by your comment in the chat, so I just wanted to say that.
I think there's less those big prizes for mature artists, but that's beginning to change now too, because people are realizing that, especially now, I mean, how do you even afford a studio now for emerging artists? So it takes a long time. Like some of us here were just saying that, kind of now we're getting momentum. It takes a long time to build an art career, and the art world and younger artists are even realizing this, and things are beginning to change even with those big prizes. They're being re-examined of why this one big pot goes to one person and why they're under a certain age.
All right. Well, I think we've caught all of the questions. If there's anyone who had popped a question into the chat and I missed it, or we have any more questions.
Modessa had a question. I think we kind of answered it, but
okay.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Let's see. Back up. Oh, this one about your art being good enough, when good is usually dictated by the authorities in the art world. Have you ever thought to change your direction in order to be more accepted or gain more recognition? Oh, that's a good one. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. I know that I've thought of that a lot, and I've actually done it. I think the reason I went back to painting in 2008 was because I decided, who cares? I really love painting. Like, I was always feeling so guilty about painting because, since the 70s, it's been, talked about as being dead, and, painting, it just has no meaning anymore. But you know what, I've found that you just need to do what you really love to do. And those people that say that, theorists and people that say painting's dead, they'll come into your studio and then they'll see a painting and say, oh, I love that. It's so beautiful. So, I just think it's a bunch of, the trends are really, really a difficult thing, and you need to ignore them. I really think you have to ignore them and do what you really need to do. So I love painting, and I started doing it again in 2008, but I hadn't done it. I was teaching it, but I hadn't done it since undergraduate school.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
Yeah, and it's my soul is really in painting, and now I have a video project in mind, but I think I couldn't have gotten to the video project if it hadn't been for the painting.
Yeah, for me, it really does come down to motivation. And I think as an artist or as a professional artist, that's one of the things that you have to really think about is, what is your motivation? I mean, if your motivation is to earn a living, if your motivation is to gain status, if your motivation is to be famous, if your motivation is to make large sales, none of that has anything to do with the arts. So you're not thinking as an artist. So you have to be clear on your motivations. Is your motivation the study of light? Is your motivation the study of social structures? Is your motivation, these are the things that you really have to be asking yourself when you're asking yourself about trends and the like. It's a serious business. It's a lifestyle. It's an altering decision to become an artist.
That was very well very well put, Michel. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's you've got to be true to yourself, and you've got to be true and trust your instincts about what you need to do, and really put blinders on. I think there's a time to look at art and to take in information, but it's nowhere in the studio. It doesn't involve. It doesn't relate to the studio at all. In the studio, you've got to you follow your nose and your instinct.
I remember grappling with that, hearing that painting is dead and thinking, well, that must leave me out then, but because I'm not changing what I do. So I just had to ignore it. You just do, like you say, what you feel you have to do. And I think paint. I think and breathe paint. So that's, just get over it.
Yeah, it was the same. I remember hearing that painting is dead, and I thought, well, I guess I'm getting a BFA in death then. And yeah, I think you just have to do what's authentic to you. Yeah.
I'm
But
sure
even the theme,
that's okay. You go ahead, Leesa.
Well, even the thematic thing, like when you guys were in school, I thought someone would bring this up. I'm glad that you didn't, but I'll bring it up. I used to say to you, what is the content in your work? Because that was so big in postmodern times. I never said that the last probably 20 years, but I used to say that all the time to the people here. What is the content? And what I meant was, what is the meaning? And does it mean anything? And I agree with that, that it should mean something, but now I forget what I'm going on with. Oh, yes. But there are certain themes that are sort of taboo as well, and certain themes that you should be focusing on, one can feel as well. So, for example, if you want to paint flowers, maybe you're not a serious artist. That's what I used to think. Then came along Zachary Logan, and what can we think of him? So, I mean, you just have got to ignore these pressures that are external pressures and do what you really feel you want to do, and know that you are smart, and that you can trust yourself. Because yeah, I used to have all these shouldn'ts. You shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that, and you can't do this, and it's not healthy for an artist.
And the trends change. So if you stick with it, probably in 10 years, you're going to be the hot trend.
Yeah, I'm retro now.
Well, and for me, it's also really important. I can have my own intention for the work, and that's fine, and I don't mind sharing that at all. But people that come to my work, I'm really interested in knowing what their life experience is all about and what they bring to the work, and then what their experience is in front of the work or amidst the work. That's partially how I paint. So it's not with the viewer in mind so much as, I put the work out there, and then, okay, now it's your turn. What's going to happen for you? What dialogue will this, will ensue from this? I'm interested in that.
Even with your own work, no one ever sees it the same way you do. And so you're always going to get those people that will say, well, what is she doing? Why is that happening? What's going on? You just have to believe in what you're doing.
All right, well, it's 9:03. It's 10:03 for Leesa and maybe some other people who are further east. So I just want to thank you all so much. This was a brilliant discussion, and I thank the people who posed some questions in the chat as well. And the exhibition is up for another couple weeks here. Our gallery hours are Thursday nights 4 to 8, Fridays and Saturdays 10 to 2, and we will be here as well on Sunday, October 17th, even though we will not be having a reception. We've decided that it's maybe not the best idea right now, but we will not be open this coming Sunday because it's Thanksgiving Sunday, but I will be here on the 17th if anyone needs to pop out on a Sunday 1 to 3. Or you can send us an email and we can make an appointment time. I really think it's well worth coming out to see if you haven't and you're able to. And just thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Leesa, for everything that you've done to put together the Shared Foundations show. Thank you to Marcus Miller, who's not, I don't think he's here tonight, but who wrote wonderfully about Lisa's show. And I think you can find all of this on our Facebook page. Our website, not so much, but our Facebook page has images from the shows and the essays and statements. Yeah, that's it from me. Leesa, did you have anything? Oh,
Can we just say thank you to Jovial? I see he's on the call as well.
oh.
For the great assistance and install.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jovial. Great
Yeah.
work with Kenneth, my husband.
Yes, and Kenneth.
Thank you to Kenneth too.
It was great.
Jovial says no problem.
Oh, Kenneth, thank you.
All right, so I think I'm gonna end this here. So everybody have a good night and thanks again.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Yes,
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks,
Night.
Lisa and Kristen.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you both.
I missed you guys.
Thank you, Lisa and Kristen.
you.
It's been a fantastic
you.
experience.
Yes, thanks.
Same.